Hello, and welcome to Stars on Sustainability, a podcast series from Earth Inherited, a media platform bringing sustainability conversations from boardrooms to living rooms. I am Shagun Luthra, and together we're going to be speaking to some very interesting people who are champions of the sustainability cause. India's journey to sustainability is not just a goal, it is a necessity. From ambitious net zero targets to innovations in green finance, the choices we make today will define our future. But what does it take to align economic growth, innovation, and climate action in a country as dynamic as ours? In today's episode, we're speaking to Mr. Jayant Sinha, former chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance and a key advocate for green growth in India. From sustainability finance to India's net zero ambitions, we will explore the policies, innovations, and collaborations shaping India's climate future. Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shagun, for having me.
We are very excited and honored that you have, made the time for us. To set the stage, could you please explain what net zero means for our listeners and the context of India's net zero commitment that was announced at COP26 in 2021?
Thank you very much again, Shagun, for having me on this very important program. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers who've joined us and who are listening to this very, very important discussion and conversation, which I think will have a great bearing on our future and our children's future and our grandchildren's future. So there are very few topics right now that are more important than the questions of sustainability, particularly in India. Now, to explain why I'm saying that, Shagun, let me take a step back and explain what is happening to our weather, to our climate. So when we use petrol, when we use coal, when we use natural gas, when we use all of these fossil fuels, we burn it. And when we burn it, we mix the carbon that's in those fossil fuels with the oxygen that's used for combustion. And this generates a colorless gas, gas without any odor, that's called carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide then ends up in the atmosphere. It just sort of goes up. And as it goes up, it sticks in the atmosphere. So effectively, we are using a very thin atmosphere which surrounds the planet as a garbage bin. Because as we burn this carbon, it goes into the atmosphere and it becomes like a blanket of carbon dioxide. And there are some other greenhouse gases as well. There are some of these greenhouse gases, but primarily carbon dioxide, that goes into this very thin layer of the atmosphere that we have surrounding the planet from the very inhospitable, extremely cold, and extremely hostile environment, which is in fact the universe, right? So what really protects the planet from this universe, which is, at a minus 250, 300 degrees centigrade, is in fact this atmosphere. Now, once we pump all this carbon dioxide into this atmosphere, as I said, it becomes like a blanket that surrounds the earth. And it does not allow the heat which is coming from the sun to actually go back out into the space, into the universe, right? So the heat that the sun is sending to us from 93 million miles away starts to get trapped on this planet. And as this heat accumulates, as this carbon dioxide, which is from the burning of fossil fuels, accumulates, the earth gets warmer and warmer and warmer. Now, we started using these fossil fuels from the start of industrialization, which is dated at about 1850 or so. From 1850 onwards, we started using coal in large quantities. We started burning firewood in large quantities. We started using petrol, natural gas, all of these different things. So that's when carbon dioxide started to accumulate in the atmosphere. Now, this was very slow at first. So till about, maybe 25 years ago, it was only going up a little bit. And as this blanket of carbon dioxide surrounded the planet warmed up, but the global average mean temperature from 1850 to 1950 increased only by 0.5 degrees centigrade. From 1950 to 2024, which is where we are, it has increased by roughly another 0.8 degrees centigrade. So overall, the temperature increase has been 1.3 degrees centigrade, right? So from pre-industrialization times to 2024, the essential view is that it's increased by about 1.3 degrees centigrade. Now, here's the problem, Shagun. The problem is that because we are pumping so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, even though we've increased by 1.3 degrees centigrade right now, from 2024 till 2100, the estimate of climate scientists, which have been published through the UN process, are that from 1.3 degrees centigrade, we are going to increase to 3.1 degrees centigrade. That means in the next 75 years, temperature is going to increase by 1.8 degrees centigrade. So in the last 170 years, we've increased it by 1.3 degrees centigrade, but in the next 70 years, it's going to increase by another 1.8 degrees centigrade. So the rate of warming of the planet is going up dramatically as we use more and more fossil fuels. And as this rate of warming accelerates, all kinds of bad things start to happen to our climate. So, for example, it's getting much warmer everywhere. We have heat waves in Delhi. Last year, we had a month of 40-degree temperatures, which we've never had before. Maximum temperatures went up almost to 50 degrees centigrade in Delhi. We have droughts. We have very fast melting of the Arctic and the Antarctic ice sheets. We have glacial melting, which is why we're getting all of these flash floods in the Himalayas. And we have extreme weather events of all kinds. So we have much larger and much more fierce cyclones. We are getting forest fires. We are getting desertification. All of these extreme weather events are starting to happen as well. And these are only going to get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. So as global warming accelerates, weather is going to change even faster and even quicker than human beings can cope with it. And so this very temperate, lovely planet, this very lovely planet that we have inherited from our ancestors, is going to become more and more inhospitable to our way of life. And the geographic area that's going to be most affected, Shagun, is actually South Asia. And we've just had air pollution in Delhi, which has been unimaginably bad. And in part, this is being triggered by climate change. Of course, we're using fossil fuels, so that's creating the pollution in the first place. But then we have this temperature inversion that's happening, that's accentuated by climate change, that's trapping this pollution close to our own surface of the earth. And that's creating unimaginable levels of air pollution, which is, of course, a tremendous health hazard for all of us. So therefore, as the rate of global warming accelerates, all of these negative weather and climate effects are going to get more and more intense, and they're going to get worse and worse. So whether it's cyclones, droughts, floods, cloud bursts, all of these climate changes are going to happen faster and faster, and they're going to get more and more intense. And as I said earlier, it is South Asia, that is the South Asian subcontinent, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. It's this part of the world which has a very intense combination of heat and humidity that is going to be the most affected area on the planet. And of course, the monsoons are really very, very crucial and vital to South Asia's economic health and to our climate. And it is the monsoons that are also going to be impacted and are likely to become either more intense or less reliable, but they will also be very, very impacted by what's happening with climate change. And when we say 3.1 degrees centigrade is what people are saying that global average mean temperatures are going to increase by, remember that is a global average mean temperature. 2/3 of the planet is actually ocean. So global average land temperatures may well increase by more than 3.1 degrees centigrade because most of the heat is absorbed by the oceans. So land temperatures may increase much more than 3.1 degrees centigrade. And this is the mean temperature, the average temperature, across the year. If we come to the maximum temperatures which are around 48, 49 in northern India, may well increase by 5 or 6 degrees centigrade. So we may well have maximum temperatures in the mid 50s in India in the next 20 or 30 years. And we could easily have heat waves that are above 50 degrees centigrade and that can last for weeks at a time. So effectively, if you're living in northern India or maybe even in southern India because of the higher humidity, unless you have air conditioning, it's going to be very difficult for you to lead a normal life. So this is all coming at us. It's like a freight train that's coming at us very, very quickly in the next 20 or 30 years. And we have to build the systems, we have to build the homes, the offices that will allow us to survive these unprecedented changes in climate.
A lot of this is already happening, right? We're seeing the beginnings of this. I'm sure it's going to get a lot worse. So, about the net zero, what it means and what was discussed in 2021. Do you think you can explain what that really means? And
Yes. So what we have to do is we have to reduce the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases than we are putting into this very fragile atmosphere of ours. And when we say net zero, what we mean by that is that we are not going to put any net greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So yes, we may still be putting up a little bit, but we will also be taking some of those greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. So net, which is between the pluses and the minuses, and forests, for example, are natural carbon sinks. So if we have much more forest cover, they'll be pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Even if we put some carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, on net basis, between what's being pulled out and between what's being put out, we get to a net zero balance in greenhouse gas emissions. And when we talk about net zero, that's what we're talking about. Between the pluses and the minuses, it nets out to being zero. And my big slogan in this is that net zero is massively net positive for India. So it's really, really good for India if we can get to net zero. And I think the Honorable Prime Minister and most of the senior policymakers understand this very well. And that's why in Glasgow in 2021, the Honorable Prime Minister made an announcement that India would get to net zero. That is, the carbon we put into the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere will be balanced out by the greenhouse gases that we take out of the atmosphere, and that this balance is going to be achieved by 2070. So India has made an announcement where we are going to reach net zero by 2070. By way of context, most of the rich countries of the world, which are the OECD countries as they're called, the high income countries in the world, have announced that they are going to reach net zero by 2050. So while India has announced 2070, most of the rich countries of the world have announced that they will reach there by 2050. China, which is the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, 30% of all the greenhouse gases that are being emitted on the planet right now are being emitted by China. China has also announced that it will reach net zero by 2060. By way of comparison, India today is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We emit about 7% of the total greenhouse gases that are emitted on this planet. So today we are emitting more greenhouse gases than all of Europe combined. So we are now the third largest emitter, obviously after China, which is at 30%, the US, which is at about 14 or 15%, and then India at about 7%. On a per capita basis, of course, we're far lower than those of high income countries because obviously we have 1.45 billion people.
Mr. Sinha, I'm sure that a target as ambitious as net zero by 2070 was met with some amount of skepticism.
Shagun, there was no skepticism. In fact, it was widely applauded and appreciated. And there are really two reasons for that. Number one, because now all the policy making and all of the planning within the government, and of course for industry as well, is aligned towards this target of 2070. So that has provided a lot of clarity and a clear direction for how people have to think about their emissions. And so everybody is now focused towards 2070 as a target, and everybody is now quite comfortable with India's approach to this. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is that, and I and many others have argued, and I think now it's been widely accepted, that net zero is massively net positive for India. So whether we look at it in terms of economic growth, job creation, investments, air pollution, when we look at it from all of these different perspectives, everybody agrees that net zero, in fact, is the trajectory. It is the direction of travel that India needs to be on right now. So this is something that everybody has applauded everybody's appreciated, and it's given them a very clear target to aim at.